Bote, welcome to another episode of the Bantu Boyz Podcast. I'm your host, Baleko Wisa, here with
Patrick Delabanza.
Right, and today we have a very, very special guest. We're going to talk about civic engagement. But first of all, remember, Bantu Boyz Podcast, the podcast that highlights the Congolese talent and talent around the diaspora. So if you're a talented Black person, come and get on this podcast or whatever. So today's episode is about civic engagement. We're talking about, right? All right. So we have a very, very special guest. You may recognize today's guest from episode 5 and 13, with the presidential election 3 months away and the major political party conventions less than 2 weeks away. She returns today to talk to us about civic engagement. Here's her bio for those who are unfamiliar, but everybody knows you, right? Her name is Lukogho Kasomo. Is a Congolese American. All right, I did it. Is a Congolese American, U.S. and Africa policy strategist. Wow, I didn't know you did all that. Right. She was born in North Kivu, DR Congo, and raised in Southern California. She has extensive experience in public affairs, policy formulation, project management, and strategic communications as a former U.S. congressional staffer. She most recently worked in business development and strategy for a Fortune 500 defense contractor. Wow, let me get some money. Before joining the defense industry, she worked for Ghanaian American conglomerate group. Excuse my pronunciation. Is it Nudum? Okay. Nudum. Okay. As a part of the Africa Business Fellowship Program sponsored by the African Leadership Network. She is the co-founder of the Congolese Diaspora Impact Summit and Kumi. Is it Edu? Edu. Lukogho has a master's in business administration with an emphasis in general management and a certificate in international business from Howard University, HU, and a bachelor of arts degree in political science with a minor in public policy and administration from San Jose State University. She's a member of Women of Color Advancing Peace and Security and the National Black MBA Association. It is our pleasure from the Bantu Boyz to welcome back to the podcast, Lukogho Kasomo.
Thank you.
Wow,
you just call me lazy with that bio. I really don't appreciate it.
Like you're just a lawyer, I have 2 masters. Like, wow, you really like do good work. Wow. I'm up here making jokes about my name. This is great. So Lukogho, how are you doing?
I'm doing good today. I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. How are you all doing?
It's another. I don't even know what's today. Monday? What is it?
Yeah, I thought it was Wednesday, but it could be Monday.
Yeah.
You see that meme with Spider-Man where he's pointing at all the days are pointing at each other?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying, right? That's what it feels like. These are the days or whatever. So let's get right into it, Lukogho. Given everything that's going on from like COVID-19, Black Lives Matter, presidential election, and etc., why should Black people be engaged in politics?
So, first of all, before I get into my whole spiel, I want to do a quick shout out to all the folks who have been on the front line. So all the doctors, all the nurses, anyone that has been considered essential, thank you. And also to the good folks that graduated this year, congratulations to you all.
Wow, very political. This is good.
And now leading into why things are important. So obviously this year has been, I can't even say it, because it's a family-friendly show, right? So this has been a year of.
I mean, you can have your kids watch it, but
right.
We got that E for a little bit explicit, even though
maybe it's not a family-friendly show. But anyways, so either way, this has definitely been one of these years that I don't think anyone could have imagined. I know in 2016, I don't even want to acknowledge him being the leader of this country, but. When President Trump took office, there was definitely a lot of fear and trepidation about what it would look like. Mm-hmm. But with COVID that has happened, with just a lot of rolling back of a lot of our liberties and justice, various justices, that is like one reason why Black folks especially should come out to the polls this year and vote. Because from funding for immigration, for social welfare programs, to the justice system, as we've been seeing. Like, these are all issues that unfortunately adversely affect Black and Brown communities. And if folks don't come out and vote, then what we're experiencing right now is just going to be just a little bit. It's just going to be the tip of the iceberg. So that's what we got to get out there and make sure we're voting. Otherwise, I can't even imagine, nor do I want to imagine, what another 4 years under this administration will look like.
Let me ask you this, or add on to what you said about funding. Before COVID, I do research, right? So I work in the lab. So when people hear like funding is backed up and it's not directly affected, the doctors I was working under, the grants that we had once Trump got into office, they decreased insurmountably. Like it decreased so fast because his administration doesn't believe in science. So you had people that were working like 40 hours, 45 hours. They had their grants for the next 3-4 years, all cut in half once he got into office. So when people see the domino effect now of like how this administration doesn't believe in science, they don't listen to specialists that have been studying 20, 30 years about science and disease or whatnot, it has a huge, huge, huge effect. People say, oh, they're losing money, and they're like, what money are you talking about? There's people's lives that have been like affected, including mine. But let me ask you this. You say we have to go to the polls just for like, devil's advocate, right? To play devil's advocate. I'm a Black person that's been in this country forever, right? Since the beginning, all right? Why, like, we've always voted. Black people have always voted and still nothing has gotten done. What do you say to that?
So one of the things like that I always tell folks, and I especially, recognize this for the Black folks who have been a part of this, the fabric of this nation, that have built this nation, how disenchanting it can feel to go to the polls. But what folks don't realize is that when you're voting, you're not just voting for the president. There are various layers and various other offices that folks are voting for us as well, that also play a huge impact on your local livelihood. So people, and right now, the conversation is very much so like pigeonholed and focused on the highest office of the land, which is the presidency. But what folks also don't realize is, like, during that time of voting, there are folks that will be folks who are running for various seats in Congress. So whether it's the House of Representatives or for Senate. And that's also really important because those are the folks that create our laws and that have a major say in the various laws that affect you. So yes, the president is, the person that kind of oversees everything. But for example, when I worked in politics, I worked during the Obama era. Mm-hmm. And a lot of folks now, especially, we look at that era with like rose-colored glasses where you're just like, oh my gosh, everything was great. The economy was doing something, you felt so free, whatever it might be. But the reality from the inside, especially towards the end, is that the Republicans have taken over a good amount of the House. So when we were like working on different legislation, there were a lot of things and a lot of reforms and different laws that various lawmakers were trying to create and push forward, but it couldn't happen. And so right now, the big push is we're trying to take back those seats, especially in key areas where you have, it's literally a decision between flipping a seat from red to blue. And that, for demographics that are most affected, us being the Black community, Black and brown folks, low income folks, it's really a decision of like who's going to show up for you and who's going to represent you in Congress, and making sure that, food stamps aren't being cut or SNAP isn't being cut, making sure that we can actually hold our local, police accountable, making sure that, our education and our school systems are being funded, because that's another kind of wild thing that happens in this country, is that we don't allocate a lot of resources to our education. And so when I tell folks to vote, it's not just focused on, voting for the president. It's also making sure that you are paying attention to the local elections that are happening in your community. So understanding and knowing who your members of Congress are, not just the senators, but whoever is representing you in the House. And I know a lot of folks sometimes don't know who that person is, but it's very easy. You can just go to house.gov and you put your address and it'll tell you. And those are folks that do a lot of the work in making sure and passing through the various laws. So even before it reaches the presidents, these are the very hands that it passes through. So you can focus on the president, which is very important because that's the person that's ultimately going to make sure that it gets in. But you need to make sure that the local players who are on the ground are there supporting, causes and things that are important to your community.
Do you think? I'm sorry, Patrick. Before we go to number 2, do you think Black people need to put our money together and fund, even locally, even if it was like your city planner, or local government to be like, hey, these roads need to be cleaned, or you need to make sure this doesn't happen again, where this police department doesn't kill this innocent Black person. Do you think we need to put our money together and sponsor these politicians like other groups do?
Absolutely. I think that Black folks should definitely be using their economic resources, and not just in the form of, donating to someone's campaign, but also making sure that your local representatives know like who's there, right? So we live in Southern California. We're all kind of a part of like the LA infrastructure to a certain degree. Right. And what a lot of folks don't realize is that for our specific community, being the Congolese community, there are a lot of Congolese people in Los Angeles. There are a lot of Congolese people who are in San Diego and in San Francisco. Oh. And when, folks are, I don't want to say complaining, but talking about various things that are happening in their community, I often say, like, you live here and you pay taxes, and your kids, for a lot of folks in our community now, your kids are American, you might be American as well. So you have every right to make sure that your voice is being heard, because you're contributing to this economy and to this ecosystem of making sure that your city is thriving. So why wouldn't you take it to your office and take it to these local politicians and say, hey, I noticed in my kids' school that they don't have like the latest textbooks, or they don't have the latest technology. Why is that? And that's because, folks are voting for the right folks to come in, so that we can make sure that those resources get allocated into those places.
Pat, I'm sorry. Go to the next one. I'm sorry, Pat.
Okay, no, it's no problem. So obviously we talked about voting, the importance of voting, but just wondering, besides voting, like what are some like other ways for people to be civically engaged?
Yeah, absolutely. And folks, voting is very important, but beyond, voting, I tell folks, like, get involved in your community. So
sorry, I was just adjusting my mic. Go ahead.
I would say it sounded like COVID.
I know. I was like, what happened? But a couple weeks ago, I was on another kind of call to action, civic engagement call. And one of the things that I had challenged folks to do is, let me ask you all, have you all been to a city council meeting before?
I haven't.
It's been let me think. Actually, more like the committee for the city, but not specifically a city council meeting.
Okay, so not the full like city council meeting.
No, I've watched it online. I've watched a few of them online, but not in person.
I've been to one. I was in downtown LA, city of Los Angeles. It was funny because there was a lady that was always complaining, but they said, oh, she comes every Friday. Like she would just come every Friday and just complain. You know what I mean? I'm not complaining, but that was her right. She'd be like, we need to fix these roads. They were like, oh, they knew her by first name. And I was like, oh, you can just do that? You can just come there and just like talk about the problems you have?
I'm glad that you actually walked into that example, because something that folks don't realize is that, from your city council all the way up to the senator's office, it's not like the White House. Like you just can't walk into the White House and be like, I want to meet with the president, right? Or one of his staff members. But for your local elected officials, you can do that. And a lot of folks don't realize, like, you can call up whoever your mayor is. And if there's an issue happening in your community, I mean, typically it's not going to be the mayor that's going to answer the phone, but it'll be a staffer. And then you can actually meet and go to your, local representative's office, even at your city level, to say, hey, these are things that we're noticing that are not going well in our community, or these are things that we would like to bring to the community. And you can meet with those folks. So this woman who was there every Friday, while some people may kind of see her as like a nuisance, she's doing her civic duty. She knows that she lives in her community and she pays taxes, and she has every right to be there to continue to advocate for, change to happen in her community.
It's interesting because, like, it seems kind of hidden that people don't know that, like, that's your right. As long you're paying taxes, you're a citizen of this country. You have every right to, like, I don't want to say complain, but it's just like you have the right to, like, bring attention to something that's happening in your neighborhood. And I feel a lot of people feel like disenfranchised. They feel like there's nobody that can help fix my road. I can complain about my roads, the job market, or I live in a food desert. They don't know that they can go to they don't even know where to start.
And I want to say, like, first of all, it's not complaining. Folks are raising awareness. And yes, they're raising awareness and they are being engaged. And I agree. Civics, I think we all went to high school here, and we do have to take civics courses.
Not when I was in high school, unfortunately.
Yeah, I didn't.
No, it was AP government, but we didn't have like a regular government class that you had to take. It was an elective.
Yeah. Patrick, you said
look at you. But a lot of beforehand, civics was like a regular part of American education, where folks would like learn about how you go register to vote, and just the basic levels of like what that means to be a good American citizen. And we don't really have that anymore. And so, yeah, I agree. Like, if you were to ask some obscure question to most Americans or most folks, walking down the street, and if you were to say, tell me about X amendment, people would look at you like, what?
First of all, I didn't even know that was in schools. Patrick, we're older than you, Luko. Like, that was never, right? Like, what? Learn how to vote? What? In school? In America? Oh, no. No way.
Yeah. We're all age mates, but it was definitely, at least where I went to school, that education is not a one kind of like fits all. Like, every county, every city kind of has like their own, plan in terms of what type of curriculum that they use. There's like a standard curriculum that's supposed to be used statewide, but I have found that my friends who went to school in San Bernardino or in Riverside County or in LA, like, we had vastly different experiences, even if we graduated in the same year. And, because of that, it's like, you could have been growing up in Oakland and more about X, Y, and Z versus someone else who grew up in LA. So that's a real reality. So with civic engagement, to get back to your question, so it's more than just about voting. It's about, understanding what's happening like locally, knowing what's at the very, very local levels, understanding what that means with your school board. So showing up and seeing if you have kids in school.
Right.
Understanding who's running that, how those decisions are being made. Understanding like the waste management in your city. Actually works for a private-public partnership that handles waste management throughout most of California, but primarily in LA. And so a lot of folks don't really know, like, you put your trash out on a Friday or on a Thursday and it gets taken, and no one knows like what happens after that. Or if there's an issue with the waste in your community, who do you call? As well as just, making sure that folks are aware of their basic rights. Like, we have a lot of folks who are undocumented, and being undocumented doesn't mean that you are without rights in this country. And so that's something else that I know we've worked in our community specifically as well to kind of help folks to not be afraid. If someone does come to their home, like what can they do? What can they say? What are, police allowed to do and not allowed to do? So that all falls into our civic engagement.
Yeah. And I want to
go ahead, Pat.
I just want to throw just add something on top of that. Definitely everything you said for sure, and just almost as an addition to it. You don't have to just do it by yourself. You can also like identify organizations that do this exact kind of work, strength in numbers. So maybe you by yourself are like, I don't know, but I guarantee you there's an organization doing work around an issue. Most likely, maybe there isn't, but most likely most issues that you most problems you're dealing with. So you find one of those organizations and then maybe you go volunteer time. So instead of it being one person highlighting an issue, it's 20, it's 30. So just keep that in mind. Like look in your area and see.
Absolutely.
So Luko, from your experience as a congressional staffer, what is the importance of constituents contacting their elected officials?
So I'll let you on a secret. Your congressional office, your congressional office, especially in DC, most of the time, people in the DC office, not everyone will have like direct connection city that they're working for.
Right. Of course.
For example, I worked for a New York member who represented the Bronx, and the demographic of folks in the Bronx is very similar to communities that I've lived in, my own Congolese African community. I'm not from the Bronx, right? So for me, there was this steep learning curve in terms of understanding not just like New York politics, New York City politics, understanding like what has happened in the 5 boroughs, what's happened in the Bronx specifically, that has impacted or affected the constituents and the folks that lived in the district.
Right.
And so when constituents came to our office, or they would call me, or they would reach out to us specifically for the issues that I handled. I'm living and working in DC, so I don't get to see
every day
what's happening. And even though we do have staff that are in the local office, there are sometimes issues that have to be sent over to DC. So for me, it always helped when constituents would come and they would say, like, this is my firsthand account of what's going on. Because then it's no longer just like a nameless issue. You have someone who you can identify, you have a name, you have a face, there's accountability to say, this is what's happening. We're not just making this up. These are the folks who we have, we have the information, and we can say, this is directly impacting our constituents and our residents in the Bronx.
Okay. Patrick, go ahead. I have nothing to follow up.
Okay. This next one, the one I was about to ask, is kind of redundant with the other ones that we asked already. So just jump into the one after that. So for those who don't know, and I want to congratulate you. So Lukogho, along with Jim, and how do you say Jim's last name? I don't want to butcher it. Ngokwe.
This pronunciation together. Come on.
Hey, I know I got to work on it. But so they published an article, an op-ed piece in Foreign Policy magazine. It was titled "Decolonize the State Department," and it had the subtitle, "As U.S. policymakers grapple with systematic racism, it's time to start tapping the expertise of diasporas." So, like, congratulations. It's a great article, everybody. When we post this video, we'll put a link to that article in the bottom. But Luko, if you could you just kind of give a little summary of what that article is about? Because I really believe that what you talked about in that article definitely relates to today's topic.
Sure. So we released the article kind of to co-align with the 60th anniversary of the Congolese Independence Day. And so obviously in 60 years, you can think about where the Congolese diaspora is. And we now have a pretty sizable community of Congolese folks that are spread out throughout the US. And I'll just kind of tell like a quick background story before I get into that. When I moved to DC, initially with the intent to work in international policy, specifically policy. I end up finding, and I'm not alone in this, I have other friends who are either Congolese or from other African countries, was that we were kind of shut out of these spaces and places. And we were finding that non-Africans would be picked as like the priority to, lead policy and political engagement for these various, whether it was the UN, it was like the IMF, or it was even like working in other US-based agencies. You didn't really see a lot of Africans doing Africa policy. And so now we are all kind of coming full circle where we've worked significantly within politics. And we've come to realize it was basically just a call to say, hey, you have, we're a new demographic of Africans. We're not necessarily like our parents who may have come here on, on an education basis, but found themselves stuck. And so we're never really able to like make it into higher levels of academia or into higher levels of whatever organizations that they were trying to work for. Like a lot of us, we grew up here, we went to school here, we have a lot of education, we have a lot of talent, we have a lot of space. We are useful, not just because of all of the skills that we come with, but the fact that we can parlay, we understand what it is to be American. We also understand what it is to be Congolese or to be African. And so it was really just a call to say, hire African talent and hire other diasporas to do this work. It doesn't have to be this thing of fear as to like where loyalty lies, which is what had typically been the excuse as to why African folks hadn't been hired. Now it's like, no, we can definitely still do our jobs as Americans and advocate, for the best case or, the best interest of America, while also still making sure that we are doing this work in a way that is reflective of our communities and reflective of our talent base.
I think one thing that you guys are fighting, I don't know if you've thought about this, great article, by the way, we don't have the same inferiority complex our parents have, right? Because when they come here on a visa or they come here to go to school, they're just like, I just want to just get a job, and just live a life as peaceful as possible, right? Whereas like with us, like you said, we went to college with them, we went to school with them. We know like they're just regular people just like us, and we probably work harder than them in these universities and schools, or when you're applying for these jobs or whatnot. So when I was reading your article, I kept thinking like the reason why they're possibly not allowing us to get these positions is just the fact that we are still African. Like when they're talking about how by 2050, 40% of Congo and Nigeria are going to be the poorest people of the world, Yeah. Subconsciously, I don't care how much you've been raised here, but the older you get and the more you know yourself, I want to fix that. I want to help that. But that's $1 billion industry to keep us poor. So I don't know, it feels like there's always going to be like a conflict or whatever for us, because it's like I'm American, but I'm Congolese, I'm Nigerian, I'm from Zimbabwe or whatever,
I totally hear you on that. Go ahead.
No, that was it.
No, I was saying I totally hear you on that. And it's this kind of catch-22, especially when we talk about economic development, right? Because it's such a huge industry in terms of funneling aid, not just to Africa, but to other emerging economies or developing economies. That's a big industry. And so this whole idea of what happens as these places start to become more advanced, like what does that look like for other typically been on top of the world? I mean, there is kind of that space and that piece that it's like the elephant in the room that we don't always want to address, because a lot of these places have pretty significant populations. And so it's like, what does it look like in terms of the changing of superpowers and the changing of super economies? And I think that to one degree, yes, there is that fear of like, we are still African, but I think that there is still like a lack of understanding in terms of the African diaspora And that was also the other thing, that the reason why we mentioned the Indian American diaspora, and we also talked about the Haitian American diaspora, is that you have these communities that have been very visible, that, you know, the US knows about, they've engaged with. They themselves have also been able to organize, and have been able to organize in ways where economically, like, they, you know, they're supportive of each other's businesses, and then also supporting folks who do want to run for public office. That has been able to happen in primarily in the Indian American community. And the only problem is, like, we can't really compare these two. Like, you can't compare Congo and you can't compare India together, because it's the apples to oranges type of situation, right? Like, both have existed for a very long time in the world. We have very rich histories, but in terms of our political and economic development, India has been organized for a much longer time than the US than Congo has, and has had the support of the US and Britain in a lot of their affairs that we just haven't had. And so for us as Africans coming to the table saying, like, give us a chance, there's still this kind of hesitation in terms of, like, well, what do you all know and what do you all bring to the table? And so it's also kind of this other call to say, like, as a community, now is our time to not just hang in the fringes, and to just kind of do the, like, we're, you know, we've got the education, we're making the money, we're just keeping it pushing. Like, we have all of those things. So now it's the time to say, hey, recognize this and put us in those positions to make those decisions.
Do you think those these rumblings of these political demands are stemming from because you guys you hinted on it in the article how, like, with the Black Lives Matter movement, like, everybody around the world, we're all stuck at home, we're all seeing, like, acknowledging, like, our past, like, hey, Belgium, you owe us an apology for what you've done to us. Do you think that's the root of it? Like, we're finally starting to get, like, I don't want to say, like, we're regaining our confidence. Like, we're not, you know, going back to that word of inferiority complex. Do you think that's where it's stemming from?
Yeah, I think Black Lives Matter, the movement really brought not just to the US, but to the world, like, the injustice that Black folks have been experiencing systematically in this country for, I mean, from the founding, right? And from when they were put over here. And so now it's now become so in our faces that folks are like, we're tired. And I think folks in Europe also were finally able to find, like, a voice, because I always tell people, like, Europe is one of those interesting places, specifically France and Belgium, where I know a lot of African-American, you know, older leaders like James Baldwin, Josephine Baker, they all went there, and they said that, you know, they felt truly like human beings or themselves. But what folks tend to realize is, like, there were Black folks that were living there too before they arrived, and they were getting the same red carpet treatment because they're Africans. And that's something that folks don't really talk about, is, like, the treatment, the global treatment of Black people, not just in the US, but in Europe and Asia, and even in our home countries, what that looks like. And so this movement brought a space and a platform for folks to say, enough is enough. We need change.
And I think it's funny that you say that, because I think that's what happened during quarantine. The whole world, every Black person around the world was just like, hey, you're being mistreated, you're disenfranchised, you're at an economic disadvantage. And it's all over the world, from, like you said, Australia, Caribbean, South America, the Americas, North America, Africa, Europe, Canada, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, and I think like it almost seems like, hey, you can't fool us. I don't care about you kneeling. I don't care about you wearing kente cloth. It doesn't mean anything. Right. That's why the first question when I asked about, we don't, like, how are we as Black people in this country supposed to feel about voting? Go vote. It's like, we've been voting. Like, it's not like Black people haven't voted. You know what I mean? Our communities are still being, like, disenfranchised. They're still being gentrified. You know what I mean? Like, you know, the fact that the jail population since, like, what, civil rights has gone up, like, what, 300%? We're like 25% of the world's jail population is in America. That's crazy. The world's jail population, we're 25% of it. And we know we're being targeted. So it's like, I don't know how to change it, but I'm just saying, like, I think we're becoming more aware, like, hey, there's this game that's being played. So we don't know, how do we change it politically? I guess maybe that's my question.
Sure. I mean, and to another point that kind of connects that first question in this article, you know, right now it's really just a call to, like, you don't have to just vote, you can run. And I think folks are seeing that a lot as well. In that if someone who's representing your community isn't representing, they're not the gatekeeper. They don't have to be the only person to do this work. And we've seen a lot more, specifically Black women. There are more Black women that are running for political office this season than what we've seen before. And that is that's phenomenal, because when you think about, especially in the Black community, who does a lot of the footwork, who's constantly coming out and doing the advocacy, who's, you know, both on the front and behind the line, it's Black women. And so why not, instead of just being the person that's organizing or leading, actually then take it one step further and say, no, you know what, I can take it one step further and run for office and make sure that my folks are also, their voices are being heard and being represented, whether it's local office, like city office, or it's at your state level, or it's in Congress, you know, why not?
As you should. And the irony about it is, like, you're a better representation of the areas you serve, because you live there, you know the day-to-day, you understand the people. Like, I mean, this is a side note. I always wondered and wish, I wish more police officers lived in the neighborhoods they patrolled. You know what I mean? It'll be a nice, like, empathetic factor, rather than, because it's different when you know somebody by their name, right? Like, it's, oh, look at Keith, he always steals. So rather than you just cuff him up, you'd be like, Keith, why are you stealing? I have no money. All right, well, let me help you try to find a job. Like, policing shouldn't be used as a way to just put people in jail. It should be, how do we, like, rehab it? How do we change people? How do we make people not commit the crime? It's like same thing in medicine, right? It's about preventive medicine, not keeping people on drugs. You know what I'm saying? On medication. But that's neither here nor there. So I'm sorry, Patrick.
Another conversation.
No.
Policing is.
Yeah, we could do literally a whole long episode about that. But what we should probably, because we're touching on it, but so just wondering, obviously with what you guys talked about in that piece, and once again, Foreign Policy Mag, guys, check it out. We'll put the link. But with what domestic policy issues do you see, like, the diaspora being effective on? Like, which ones do you see then?
So I think the number one issue that kind of comes off top of my head, and most folks that think about it, is immigration. Because of the changes that were made over the last year and the various immigration bans that have been put in place by this administration, Congolese folks now actually are making up a good sizable amount of folks that are coming to America. And I believe last year we had the highest number of refugees that came to America as a result of that ban. So with immigration, you know, you think about where these folks are being placed and which communities they're being put into. And so immigration is kind of like, it's one piece of the pie. The other issue then happens is, like, once folks get here, what folks don't realize is, like, a lot of newly arrived folks and also new Americans, you know, tend to not necessarily be of economic means. And so when you think about, like, what's, you know, important, it's education, it's access to healthcare, it's access to nutrition and access to food. And those are all really important issues that not only just affect us as Congolese and Africans and Black folks, but also affect a large amount of folks who are low income. And with this budding kind of economic collapse that's coming, we have to think very seriously about that and what that's going to look like for folks who are not in high skilled industries where their jobs are secured and their salaries are secured. We're going to start to see a lot more folks who are going to be seriously struggling with making, you know, their basic ends meet.
Patrick, you want me to get the next?
Well, just wondering. I mean, obviously you said immigration, and obviously that's the one that pops everybody's mind. But are there any others that you can think of? Any others? Those are the ones that come to mind.
Yeah. So I said immigration. So healthcare.
Yeah.
Education.
Yeah.
So agriculture, which for the U.S., agriculture is where access to the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, or colloquially known as food stamps, falls under. So those are big issues. Housing, we're right now, what they're saying is I think in the fall, we're going to start to see a huge wave of evictions because, folks who lost their jobs as a result of COVID have not been able to pay rent. And a lot of cities were able to put in some ordinances to help delay folks from paying rent. And you've been collecting back rent. When that lifts, like, what are you going to do?
It's very interesting because it's like what we said earlier about how we all have social media, so everybody around the world, I can literally go to France by just pressing France on Instagram, right, in Paris, and to see other countries, and I know there's different systems like socialist nations, but to see in other countries where, we're in a pandemic, this is unheard of. Like we're in uncharted waters. Like there's nobody in our lifetime that's alive that has any experience dealing with this. So I just always wonder, where does the human concept come in, where you're just like, well, we're in a pandemic, like let's just try to help the people and then try to worry about this pandemic. Because this pandemic is bigger than any law, it's bigger than any food, it's bigger than any profit, it's bigger than any money. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It bothers me that you're hearing but in fall, people are going to be losing their homes. People are already stressed out. People are committing suicide. People are dying. And you're worried about trying to make a profit. And then you hear there's certain groups where they're just making this large amount of profit because, we can only order through Amazon. You're saying, right? So, you know what I mean? I don't know. It's like the human concept of being kind to your fellow man. The fact that we don't have it really bothers me.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely been very hard to watch throughout this pandemic. When things started, I knew from just the way that history has repeated itself, what's interesting is that the 20s have always been a very difficult time. So if you look at the 1820s, if you look at the 1920s, something about the 20s is just cursed.
The 1820s? I do research on 1820s.
Yeah, so when you look at those eras, things that happened, it's like right before a huge signaling of an economic downturn and just a lot of chaos that kind of follows from there. So to be in the space now where it's 2020 and we have this pandemic and you're thinking about where's the humanity, that's a great question. That's why we have to engage folks and say, look, if you don't want the next 40 years, because realistically, looking at these previous examples of when the Spanish flu happened, it took about 40 years for the economy to really rebound from everything that happened as a result of that pandemic.
Right. Wow. Yeah, that's true. So Luko, in which domestic policy issue do you see
number 7, bro?
Number 7. Oh, I'm sorry. How do you see the diaspora shaping domestic policy?
Well, the diaspora is growing, and
incredibly too.
Yeah, we're growing exponentially. We also are amongst, in terms of the education status, at least for the Black community, for the African and the Congolese diaspora. We make up a significant portion of folks who have college degrees, who are part of what we call...
Africans have the most degrees.
Right. We get degrees. And as a result of getting these degrees, we are in industries and in roles and in positions that can garner folks a lot of economic power, and you're positioned in a space where you have more leeway and more ability to speak. And so in writing this article and in talking to folks in our diaspora, it's been a lot of communication about hey, now that you have your fancy degree and your job and all these things, like now's the time to give back and to really think about how do we as a community and as a diaspora really start to think about our issues and kind of the duality that we face in this country. So being immigrants and also being Black. And we're kind of getting things from both sides. Like we have to deal with a lot of the issues that the decisions that the U.S. makes that affect our home countries, and also dealing with the decisions that the U.S. make that affect us and our local communities. Because the reality is that for a lot of folks who do get the degrees and are able to make it, out of the community that they started in, they still have cousins, they still have, maybe your parents still live there, you still have aunts and uncles. So there's always this connection of folks that are still, in the community where you started. And that's, again, it goes back to making sure that folks know how to be like civically engaged, making sure that African diaspora also know that as an American, you can run for office. It doesn't matter if, you were born somewhere else, if you come from a household where your parents were born somewhere else, as long as you're American, you also have that ability and that access to run for public office. And so I'm very excited to see a lot more second and first generation Africans that have been running for public office in the last 5 years. Mm-hmm. Exciting. And I'm waiting and kind of looking forward to folks from our community who run for office. So if you're looking to run for office, let me know and help you.
No, I just want the money and the fame. I don't know if I want to be too political. But you when you said American issues, do you think Congolese people need to worry about policies that affect us more here, that affect us back home, or policies that affect us directly here in the States?
Oh,
that's a good question. I tell people where you spend your time, where you spend the majority of your time, and where you lay your head is where you should be focusing on. So the reality is yes, my family and my cousins and all, pretty much everyone outside of my immediate family lives in Congo. But the reality is the US, in a worst case scenario, if the US were to do an embargo on Congo, it would really impact my family that's in Congo. Cuban Americans know what that's like. Iranian Americans know what that's like because that has happened, and they've had to, figure out how to live and how to still communicate and still support their families back home in the situation.
Right.
Oh, it's striking again. There we go.
Right. Sorry, I was gonna. Hold on.
She'll come back in a moment, I'm sure. Yeah, she'll come back in a moment. But yeah, well, we'll give it a second while she.
Yeah, we'll give it a second.
Yeah, while she figures it out. But at one point, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, I wonder if, because my biggest thing back home is how do we create a system where we have money for the old, for those that are retired, our elders. Here you have retirement, at least in theory, right? And I always think about what type of policies we can create where we take care of our old back home in Congo. You know what I mean? Where they can get proper health care and stuff like that, and they can have our access to health care. They can, they can have however much money there, so that they can able to live a month. I wonder what we can do back home for our elders. Because, a lot of our parents, when our parents get old, they work here for 30, 40 years, but they'll be like, oh, I want to go back home in Congo, right? Mm-hmm. So how do we take care of the old, back home? And the irony about it is, I don't know if it's Congo, but I know Congo, for example, the median age is it's under 25. Congo is one of the youngest nations in the world.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I think.
Luko.
My bad.
No. Hey, the internet, COVID.
It's COVID. No worries.
Everybody needs to get off Zoom. Come on.
I know, right? Everybody's having these week Zoom meetings. But no, you were saying about you talked about policies of us. Should we worry about policies that affect us back home in the Congo, or policies that affect us here in the States?
Yeah.
Yes. So I was saying, though we love our families a lot in Congo, we live here 24/7 for most of us, unless you're amongst the privileged few who can kind of split your time half and half between here and Congo. Like, the reality is that the laws that are passed here in the US have more of an effect on you because you live in this country full time, as opposed to the things that are happening back home. And it sounds for some folks a bit callous, but it's like, that's, it's like when you're flying in an airplane and they tell you put on your mask first before you put on the mask, help anybody else. It's kind of like you have to, make sure where you're at first is good before you can really help and support anybody else. So folks should definitely be in tune to what's happening in the US and in tune to like what's happening in their specific community, their state, their area of the US.
No, it's real. It's when you were getting online, I was telling Patrick, I said, one of the things I think about, like, the policy I hope like we can try to help or worry about in Congo is like, what's the retirement plan for like the elders, the people that are old folks in Congo? You know what I mean? Because, our parents will work here for 30, 40 years, but then they'll be like, oh, I want to retire back home, So what type of, policy or program would be available for our old, people that are like aging? That's kind of like a thing I always worry about, because I'm not going to retire back home, but I mean, my mom has talked about it. I have aunts and uncles that are just like, they're getting there at age and they'll be like, oh, my money can go further in Congo, so maybe I can like retire back home.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Pat, my fault.
No.
And a little sentimental moment.
I think Luka might have froze again.
Right, bro?
Yeah, she might have froze again. We'll let that figure out. But I was going to say, like, for you, the question you asked, I mean, it's like, we know we have the model here. Obviously, just because it's here in America doesn't mean we got to do it back home in Congo. But we know here we have at least the social safety net, something like Social Security. But that gets into taxes and, somebody's paycheck and the government, taking a piece of that paycheck and putting it away for later, which means you have to have the structured tax system, like whatever the Congolese equivalent is of the IRS.
Right.
You'd have to have something like that over there. That would be my suggestion. But obviously that gets into other things over there being put straight and everything like that, which is a whole other thing and complicated. But I would say, Luko, kind of what you were talking about, I think in terms of the, is it more here? Is it more back home in terms of my priorities? I always say the stuff like that. You can walk and chew gum. Like you can, it's both and, the reality is it's like, for instance, if we're supporting family back home, but let's say because of, you're working, you're getting your money, you're sending it back home to support your relatives. But then let's say your boss, for whatever reason, fires you for something that's illegal, right? For some whatever trumped up reason. Now you lost your job, you can't support your family back home. But hey, if you gotta sue them, your boss, if you gotta hit up your congressman or do something to get your job back so that you can get that money again so you can support your family. So it's not a one or the other. It all is interconnected. I don't think you have to feel like you have to choose one or the other. It's just probably a situation by situation basis where you figure out, what works. And honestly, you don't got to do everything. Don't beat yourself up. Like, handle what you can handle.
I agree. I mean, I was just kind of more so answering because he was saying focus, and focus kind of, it delineates or leans towards like one area, which one, either or. And I agree, you can do both. It's definitely difficult for folks to do both, but as Africans, that's kind of our MO, anytime. It's always like the first uncle or the first cousin that comes to America is kind of like the person that establishes the pathway for the rest of the family or other members to come. And until other members come, they're usually the ones that are supporting, their immediate family that's back home, in addition to like the extended family members that are back home. Right. So the issue though is like, if things were to completely become, not available to someone living in America in terms of like them being able to get their money or to be able to work and earn an income and to advance their education, then it's a thing of like, at that point, you're not really useful or beneficial to being able to support your folks back home. And I think also right now, the challenge for those of us who are kind of like myself, I was born in Congo, but I grew up here in the States. Right. And where Congo stands at the moment, although there's talks about changing this, is that once you gain citizenship somewhere else, you are no longer Congolese officially. Now we know people do other things, but that is the official stance by the Congolese government. So somebody like myself who could be very useful on the flip side of going back to Congo and saying, hey, like I grew up in America, I understand, I know how America works in these industries and I know how to navigate X, Y, and Z. Why am I now being, treated as someone who isn't Congolese just because, we had to make a decision about bread or no bread, and we decided to go to another country. And so it's this thing about like, why are you now shut out as well in Congo? So just as much as I think that the US needs to change, there's also some reforms, speaking from the Congolese side, that need to happen there as well.
Let me add, can I add, what you said is interesting, and it frustrates me because you have all these other nations that have dual citizenship, and you have all these Congolese people in the diaspora, whether we're in the States, we're in Canada, we're in Europe, that have all this great talent, all this great skills that can benefit Congo, right? And they won't allow us to come back and have dual citizenship. Like, you work in policy and politics. Wouldn't you be the perfect person to deal with how to deal with politics across internationally? Like, I worked in Washington, D.C. Why wouldn't you want me there? I know it's very, very, it's like, I don't know if it's a fear of like bringing in the Western culture into Congo or whatever, because we are Westernized or we're Americanized. I don't know what it is, but there's a huge benefit to have those talents merging back home, whether they're in Europe, they're in the States, or Canada.
I mean, from my vantage point, I think that has been one of Congo's greatest weaknesses, is that you have a whole pool of folks that, we do go back and we get involved because we start projects, we still have family land, we still do things of that sort. But in terms of really being able to like advocate for Congo and the different countries that folks have grown up in, this is like where Congo is really and you look at places like Kenya and you look places like Nigeria. I have friends who are like a quarter Nigerian and have a Nigerian, citizenship and Nigerian passports. And you're like, you've never even seen Nigeria, but the government could equally go back to Nigeria, do their year of youth service, and then work in Nigeria and live. And that's something that it's like, Congo should do something similar in that aspect, and letting folks, as long as you have Congolese ancestry and a parent or a grandparent, like you should be able to have access and to feel comfortable in your country of origin. So that is something that we have to lobby and figure out, like, how do we get that happening? But that's some of us got to work on the U.S. and some of us got to work on Congo.
But you know what I think it is too? No, I'm sorry, Patrick, let me say this. I think the one thing is like the government of Congo is forgetting that we're in a world of globalization. We're all connected. So you can't kick people out and keep everything in. That's not how the world works anymore. You know what I mean? So
no, I agree.
Yeah. So with the next one, and Luko, you talked about, obviously, folks got to figure it out on the Congolese side, folks got to figure it out on the American side. So towards figuring out on the American side, just going back to the article once again, one of the things you guys talked about, obviously, the diaspora communities, obviously, highlighting the Indian community. And you guys sent me down a rabbit hole. And one thing I found So there's one particular organization, the name kept coming up, AAPI, the Victory Fund, the Asian American Pacific Islander Victory Fund. Mm-hmm. And what's noble about them, they're a super PAC. We'll go into that in a little bit, but a super PAC. And I know they've, I think they said they have dedicated, or they plan to spend about $2 million in this upcoming election to try to, you know, really get out the vote in their communities. So now I'm sold. Reading y'all's article and reading more about this, I'm sold on that idea. So now let's just do like a hypothetical. So imagine somebody creates, you know, in our case, Congolese, but it could be Ghanaian, Nigerian, whatever. But somebody creates a Congolese PAC or super PAC. What are the challenges you would see with one, creating an organization like that? Two, the challenges with maintaining, and probably for everybody who's watching this, if you could let us know what a PAC or a super PAC is, that'd be helpful too.
Sure. So I'm actually right now shadowing a Ghanaian PAC, Political Action Committee. And basically what a PAC is, it's folks that are coming in with the interest of, you know, supporting people who are running for office and supporting, you know, various issues that are happening in their community. So this PAC that I'm shadowing, which is it's a Ghanaian American PAC, and right now they're focused. They have one. They actually have two folks. There are two Ghanaian Americans that are running for Congress right now. There's a woman who's running for a seat in Georgia. Forgot her name, fortunately. And then there's a guy who's running for Tulsa, for Tulsa in Oklahoma.
Wow.
Yeah.
They have former school teacher. Pardon? Former school teacher. I happen to check him out. Yeah.
Former school teacher. And so basically this PAC it consists of Ghanaian Americans and Ghanaians who have worked significantly in US politics. And so they understand kind of like the ins and outs of how to do that. And what they decided to do is they committed to supporting this guy who's running for the seat in Tulsa to say, hey, like, we're going to come behind you financially and also provide kind of like the people manpower to make sure that we are connecting our diaspora that is in Tulsa to make sure that they know that, you know, you're there and that you're running for that seat so that when it does come time for election that they go to vote for you. And so a PAC does both. You know, it's partial like awareness, and then they can also pull money to support financially candidates. And then a super PAC, I believe with the super PACs, they're just more so financially engaged, and it's for folks it's for PACs that are raising like significantly large amounts of money. So they're, you know, the API Victory Fund has committed to $2 million, I think over $2 million. And so I forget where the thresholds are that delineate a PAC versus a super PAC, but there's various things, and I can give you the resource if anybody's actually like interested in creating a PAC. Kind of like your first steps and, you know, all the things that you need to do, and it tells you like, okay, once you pass that point, if you want to become a super PAC, this is like what that process looks like.
Okay,
that's incredible. Like if we had a Congolese super PAC, this is the first. Once reading your article, I knew nothing about this Asian American Pacific Islander like Victory Fund, but that's what I was saying earlier about like you have to like grease some palms. It just can't be just vote. You have to have people in power that they know their objective is to like, if there's Congolese people that live or there's Black people that live in Crenshaw and King, their whole objective is to help us out on Crenshaw and King. That's where we are or whatnot. You know, you can't hope, because hope is just like, it's not tangible. You need somebody that's going to do something, like you do A, you do B, you do C, you do D for us. So I hope, I don't know, I'm not into politics, but hopefully soon we'll be able to have somebody that, hopefully it's you, Luko, where we can have a Congolese super PAC and we can have somebody that's like, hey, the Congolese that are here in America, you do this for them. You know?
I mean, I'm definitely interested. So I have friends that I joke with. One of my closest girlfriends, she's also Congolese American, and we're kind of, you know, I'd say that's like my right hand woman, where we met in DC and have both kind of been in our career trajectories trying to figure out how do we bring more Congolese folks into public policy, more Congolese folks to know that whether it's through public policy or if you are someone that's more in the business sector, like how can you engage and how can you become a part of this process? And I took a short break. Like I'm now slowly kind of coming back into the political world. But when I left, I was like, I'm never coming back. I'm never going to work in politics ever again. I'm not going to do that. This work is very depressing. It's very tiring. But in a weird way, I guess, of everything that's been happening with this administration, I've kind of reignited this passion. And I've realized that we have a lot of young folks in our community who are interested or who are thinking about, maybe one day I do want to run for office, and they don't necessarily know how to do that. Like I know when I moved to DC, there was no one in my community, there was no one in our community in LA that I could talk to say, what do I do when I get to DC? Like, how do I navigate Capitol Hill? How do I navigate politics? How do I navigate, how do I get these internships? How do I get to these places and spaces that I want to get to? And so, to your point, we're looking at, maybe in the next few years, potentially thinking about doing a PAC and seeing how we can support more Congolese folks to do this work, because we need to be in all places. Like we can't just be, making all the coin like at Exxon or in the tech world or whatever it might be. We all have to be in the different areas and in the different industries to make sure that we're making that change.
Yeah.
What do you think, what can U.S. political parties do to better energize the African immigrant population, civically? Because we are, and me and Patrick talked about this when you unfortunately lost connection, but I think either it's Congo or Africa. We are the youngest, no, it's Africa. I think Africa is the youngest continent around the world, right?
It is Africa.
Right, I think so, right? I think the median age is under 25 or whatever, right? So there's a lot of power we're going to hold in the next 20 years politically. And the fact that we have the most degrees, and Black women specifically have the most degrees in the US or whatnot. So what do you think? How do they better energize us? Because it's you can't ignore this African population where it's everywhere.
Well, first they need to understand us. I think that, they need to understand us. So there's a lot of, in the US, they know about the Latinx community. They know about the diaspora. They know where Mexican Americans are. They know, there's significant information about Cuban Americans, about you name it, coming from Latin America. And then also the same thing with the Asian American diaspora as well. There's a lot of knowledge that's there. But the African diaspora beyond Nigeria, Ghana to a certain degree, Somalia, Ethiopia, and Kenya and South Africa, the rest of us we just kind of fall in the cracks. And so when you're talking about Africa, it's usually those areas that I just listed, folks that are coming from those countries. The folk will be like, we need to make sure we engage those communities. And for those of us who are not a part of those communities, especially those of us who come from Francophone communities, it's often we are here too, and we're actually here in sizable communities, and we contribute to folks who have a major say or a major, play in the political process. So what y'all gonna do for us? But they can't know what to do for your community if they don't know where your community is at. Okay. And so that's kind of some of the work that I've been engaged in now with this current election, is trying to work with folks that are running to understand where African diasporas are and what, the needs are for folks, and not just immigration and figuring out remittances and on the financial services piece. It's understanding okay, so there are a bunch of Congolese folks that are in Maine. What do they need? Right. There are a bunch of Congolese folks that are, in Iowa and in Idaho, of all places, which there are actually a lot of Congolese folks from the East that are in those communities. So it's the thing of, for the kids that are growing up in those communities, where they are now kind of making or adding to the Black population, Black community, how do they navigate this duality of being first gen, American, and also trying to still figure out like how to maintain or navigate being Congolese and African for all the diaspora. So identification is major. That's the first thing. They got to know where we are, and they have to know like what issues affect us, and also understanding that Africa is not a country, it's a continent. Right. So someone from Mali is going to have very different concerns versus somebody who's coming from Zimbabwe.
Right. It's interesting because the influx or like the appearance of so many like Africans in all these different industries in America over the past like 10 years, I don't think there's any tangible data, but I want to know like the shift politically, how politicians are, how they're adjusting and observing it, because they know like, oh, there's Congolese, they know, oh, there's Congolese people in Dallas, there's Congolese people in Maine, there's Congolese people in Maryland, there's Congolese people in LA. And it's like, how do we get that vote? I wonder how this in the future, how this is going to affect American politics. Because it's like, like you said, we were navigating being African or Congolese, but then you're also Black. You know what I mean? It's interesting duality.
So no, but it's not really, in terms of Congolese folks, it's not really going to affect politics until we as a Congolese and Congolese American community make it an issue to affect politics. Mm-hmm. And I say that in the sense of, you look at Ian Omar, right? Like, she is the first Somali American to be a member of Congress. Right. And that has really put Somalia has kind of always been on the US's map with everything that has happened in the 90s and 2000s. Right. But her being the first Somalian American member of Congress, like now there's no ignoring, Somalia in terms of coming before the Africa subcommittee, when issues are coming before her that affect her community, like she's there and she's an actual voice. Mm-hmm. And also the fact of like Nigerian Americans, they are constantly advocating and writing, not just like writing, but advocating for Nigeria and Nigerian American issues. That as Congolese, like we have a sizable community, but we're just not as politically engaged and as politically active as some of these other spaces and places. So until we start becoming that way, and not from a space of most political engagement and activity that happens for Congo, it's about Congo. And we tend to forget that we have our issues that we have to, handle and deal with here in the US. Like there are things that are happening in our communities here. And so when we don't talk about that and when we don't bring those issues forth, it's very easy to just kind of become forgotten or to be dismissed. So once we become organized and we can come together and say, look, we have in this, for example, for this election, if we were to say we can get 50,000 people to vote, you're going to really start to hear Congolese Americans and say, oh, they have 50,000 people that are coming to the polls that we have, identified. That's also why it's important to do the census and to make sure that you're writing in where you're coming from, because they need to know that when we're doing the subgroups and the subcategories of Black folks, when it comes to Africa, it's not just Nigeria, Kenya.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's interesting you say that, because remember when we started, I brought up the point that a lot of people don't feel like they have a political voice. They don't know they can publicize their voice. But you just said, like, you have to go and you have to make your presence felt. I think it's funny because those communities know that the government works for us, where other people feel like we work for the government. Mm-hmm. Right. And it's like, you pay the taxes, so you need to know your voice needs to be heard. That was well said. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Patrick. I'm sorry.
Oh, no. And one thing I would add to that is, I think the thing we always got to remember about America and just the way it is, there's opportunities here, but this is a nation it's built almost for self-starters. It's always about you putting that first foot forward. Unless you're lucky enough to have someone who's in the organization, who is getting whatever funds, whatever it is, somebody who's already involved and they look out for you, great. But most of the time you have to actually go out and be proactive, because they're not going to come and help. They're not going to come and give us whatever resource it is unless it benefits them. But then, one thing I would say, like, Blake, you kind of touched on it, and I suspect this, but Blake, you talked about them. Well, they know these numbers, they know that number. I would say, because I think once you get inside of organizations, it can get more complicated. I don't know if it's an issue necessarily of them knowing, because when you say them, does the person at the top know? Or is it, somebody knows, but is it the person who actually has the power to make the decision? Do they actually know? Because one of their staffers or somebody who delivers the mail, they know. But if, for instance, I don't want to bring up our president, but if our president doesn't have any knowledge of Africa, or has like a really flawed, idiotic, stupid opinion of our countries in Africa, then and he's the one who makes a decision. It doesn't really matter if everybody under him, they know, because if he doesn't know, then it doesn't help us out at all. So I would say just the reason why I say all that is this ties it all the way back in of, I don't think it's what is it? It's voting is part of it, obviously, but how do they know us? How do they know what's affecting us? We once again have to put that foot forward. We have to vote. We have to call them, whatever it is, write letters, email them. We got to show up to their offices. Maybe we start PACs, where, okay, we pay them to get in the door. Okay, now that I'm here, here are my issues. But we have to do the work on our end, because the reality is, for whatever reason, there's just more visibility of some of these other African communities. There's not the same visibility for us. And, I know it sucks, but we got to do the work. We got to get up in their ear. We got to be like that lady that you talked about, Baleko, at the city council meeting. She's there every week. They know her. They know her by name. Miss Johnson, Miss Jenkins, whatever her name is. They know her by name. They know her issues. When she calls, oh gosh, she's calling about that pothole again. Somebody get home, it's like they know, but they know her issues though, because she's always bugging them, and we got to be the same way.
Right, and that's the thing. Like, we think they work for us. We think we work for them when they work for us. Like, Luko, you brought up the taxes. You're paying taxes. You pay their salary. Go in there and raise awareness about the potholes. Hey, kids are stealing of this, that, or whatever. There's no funding for after school programs. You need to tell them. Because that's where you're able to get those funds allocated to your concerns.
And I would also say, we focus a lot on like resources, but I want folks who maybe, you're not economically like in a space or place where you can donate a lot of money to somebody's campaign, or you can donate a lot of money to a specific politician. Like, that's not the only way to be involved and to be engaged. Volunteer. If you have time and if you have the ability, even if it's like 1 to 2 hours a week or every other week, volunteer and call up your local office and see, what are ways, not even just like your local office. There are different grassroots organizations that are on the ground. Always need volunteers. So whether it's with writing letters, it's stuffing envelopes, it's going door to door, it's showing up at, like, in the next few months we'll start to see a lot of voter registration drives. That's a way that you can connect with your city. Will typically have like an outreach or an engagement outreach team that is there to help register folks to vote. And usually there's like fairs. When I lived in DC, and even when I lived in San Jose, which is like where I went to undergrad, I was volunteering in the community, and I would support different local community orgs, and I would go out there when they would have different events. So for me, African diaspora is kind of like where I like to spend a lot of my time, just as someone who grew up in an African diaspora. So in DC, I would show up when they would have like their different fairs, and I would support by volunteering during the day. And if there was like information, lending my help in the small ways of just being able to make sure that these organizations can do the work that they need to. If there's a food drive in your community, that's a way to understand and to see like this is what access to food looks like in my community. And then there you have kind of this firsthand knowledge, and you're seeing it with your eyes, and you can become a better advocate for that community, and then go to your local politician and say, hey, I noticed in this part of the city we have a lot of moms and kids that don't have access to food. Like, what can we do? How can we help? What are ways in which we can make sure that they're getting the resources that they need? So it isn't something where you just have to have money or you just have to be from a certain education status. Like, we can all get involved in small ways to help our community and to be a part of this process to create change. Also, too, with that example of the lady earlier at the meeting or whatnot, there's a lot of free programs. There's a lot of programs for like healthcare or health fairs for people that, if you're able to be as what is the word, when you go to these meetings or these hearings, that they're available for people. So when you hear people complain about, hey, I need to get, I don't know, I worked in the STI, sexually transmitted diseases or whatnot, and people needed tests. It was like, oh, well, there's like a free health fair where you can get a test for free, or you can go get a free dental checkup or whatnot. So being politically involved, we always talk about allocating funds, but there's a lot of free programs where you can find out like, oh, I didn't know I can do this. I can take this class for free or whatnot. So being politically engaged, there's a lot of other benefits as well too.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
But,
yeah. With that, we should probably go on the question and answer portion, question and answer portion. But first, little message from one of our sponsors, and then we'll get some of you guys' questions. This comment section has been real interesting during this, but yeah, just give us a moment and just hear a word from our sponsor.
Yes, great sponsor.
Have you been beat up for making bad fufu?
I'm a lawyer.
Has your family stopped giving you money because you won't become a doctor or engineer?
I'm a lawyer.
If so, you're entitled for some money. We'll help you at the law offices of Mikate and Company at 1-800-246-3654. That's 1-800-KINDOKI. No Mwamba here.
I'm a lawyer.
Yeah.
It's a great commercial.
Yeah. I mean, I like that sponsor, but once again, I don't agree with their opinions on peanut butter. But other than that, I can say they're good attorneys.
You know what you should do, Pat? We're gonna do a video where I'm actually gonna eat this. We're gonna make it alive. We're gonna make it an event.
You're gonna eat peanut butter? Oh my goodness, I'm gonna be there.
Tune in, folks. Pay-per-view. No, I'm just
kidding. Got made, and I'm gonna eat the so people can see my. Is it
gonna be one or is it gonna be many though? Because I'm not only coming for like a one and done. Like, there's got to be like.
Oh.
No, you know what I'll do? I'll have like mwamba. I'll have avocado. I'll have pili. I have everything you heathens eat it with. And I'll give you own honest judgment. Like, this is trash. That's okay. This is trash.
So Nutella, marmalade, all that. Okay.
Yeah, it'll be like a whole table. It'll be like, oh, this is pay-per-view. This is huge. He's gonna eat it. Like, this is trash.
For sure.
Well, we'll be there.
So we're here with Lukogho with Civic Engagement. First of all, thanks for doing this. This has been very informative and very. It's been great. It's funny because I don't really believe in politics. I don't know. I've lost You should be politically inclined because you live in America. I mean, you're in the world. Like, you should be worried about what's going on in your neighborhood. But I don't know. This episode will probably get me more politically engaged or whatever. So there's one question it's funny because I forgot the question we asked you. I mean, what's your spirit animal? I forgot what your spirit animal was.
Did we use it at that time or?
Did I change my spirit? I'm like, no, I'm trying to remember what my spirit. I'm gonna go with the dolphin. I feel like that's what it was last time, but it may have changed.
Okay. Dope.
Dolphin. Why the dolphin?
So dolphins they're animals that work they're very interdependent, they're community oriented, but they're also super intelligent, and they don't necessarily need to stay with their pod. They like to venture and do all that, but they're known for being pretty chill and kind of friendly, but don't mess with them because they can get a little feisty and attack. So I like that ability to kind of move between, like, I'm cool with the community, but I can also do me too, and not being afraid, like, just because I'm friendly, I got a little bite to me.
Right. Because I heard dolphins they'll beat like a fish's ass, right? Like if they don't if you mess with them, like they can, I don't know. I heard they're kind of like violent, right?
They can mess a shark up.
They don't initiate attacks. They tend to respond. That's what I've heard. Like, they're not like a dolphin attacking you is very rare. But if you are attacking or like you're threatening the pod, then they tend to be pretty aggressive. They respond back.
Okay.
So, Patrick, do you want to go to the questions? But wait, well, my spirit animal is a leopard or whatever. I like them because they can eat in trees. They're the only cat that can eat in trees.
Really?
Yeah, no, not lions, not cheetahs, hyenas. No, like they're made. They eat in trees, and plus, like a leopard is a mutated leopard is just a Black Panther. You know what I mean? Yeah. And then Patrick the Falcon, he can overlook. He overlooks everything.
Oh, you're a falcon?
Yeah.
Got you.
Yeah. And Julian the tiger. Yeah. So Patrick, let's go to the questions.
For sure. So to start off, a light one, a real easy one for you to answer. But actually, I really do love this question. A mutual friend of ours, Lukogho, mutual friend of ours, came up with this one. So the wording's off. Forgive me, because when they said it to me, I was so excited I didn't write it down the right way. But yeah, so it's as a Congolese American, when it comes to America's foreign policy towards Congo, what would be your ideal? Like, what would it look like?
This is a light question? Goodness. So foreign policy, I mean, it entails a lot of things, right? Like we have obviously the State Department. That's just one aspect. We have national defense and homeland security. That's another aspect. Really, it would be the U.S. supporting Congo's best interest to protect its citizens from outside. Yeah,
I get it. We all get it.
From the outside.
No.
From the outside. No, but just U.S. policy that supports, Congolese security initiatives and just making sure that obviously Congolese residents are safe and that they have the ability to support the country to be economically prosperous in a way that can be mutually beneficial to the U.S. as well. So trade is involved in that, and seeing more Congolese folks involved in foreign policy at all levels. So in every agency that supports U.S. foreign policy, to be able to have Congolese American folks that can represent both Congo and America here and in their offices in Congo.
Okay.
I'll just say it like that.
Yeah. And folks, that'll be our question after the show in the comment section. We want to hear what you guys feel like. What would ideal foreign policy, U.S. foreign policy towards Congo, what would that look like for you? And for some of our people in the other parts of the diaspora, UK, Belgium, France, same thing. Like, what would your respective countries' foreign policy towards Congo ideally? What would that look like for you? So look out in the comments.
Let me just say, also recognizing the Congolese genocide. We've been able to recognize other people's genocides. I'm just saying, I think that the U.S. should recognize that a genocide has happened in Congo and be able to openly speak about it and not kind of just skirt around what's obvious. We could say Armenian genocide. We could say Congolese genocide. Come on. No,
but here's the thing. If you say genocide, then there has to be recognition and reparations from Belgium. That's the big thing. I don't care about an apology. I'm not a child. The way
Belgium's issue, I'm just saying in terms of the U.S. also knows what happened in the center of Africa. So being able to recognize that and recognizing that those events have led to Congo not being able to like fully function and develop, I think it's necessary.
All right. That's true. That's real. What's the next one?
So the next one, and Luko, this person posted this question in response when we were having the conversation about dual citizenship. So this is what they had to say. So what's your response to it? So are you willing to drop your U.S. citizenship? I guess they're saying choose one, I guess, for you to have some kind of influence back home. But what's your response?
I mean, I'm very pragmatic, and as far as right now, in spite of everything that's happening in this country, like I do appreciate all of the benefits that I have been able and the privilege that I have been able to receive as an American. So no, I'm not going to drop my American, U.S. citizenship. On the flip side, there's a catch-22 to this. I think it's also really hard to put people in a position to choose one or the other, because I would love to be a dual citizen and to be able to be recognized as Congolese and as an American as well, because I am, if not, even more Congolese, because that's where my family, my ancestry, my origin is at. It's just that the Congolese government does not want to recognize that. So as someone who wants to be a good global citizen, I would love to be able to equally represent both places.
Yeah, I want to get to the root of this. Why we can't have dual citizenship? That's ridiculous. You're missing out on so much creativity, so much business, like so much opportunity, so many ideas. A job doesn't go far, an idea does. Congo's missing out on so many opportunities. I mean, so many ideas.
Yeah.
What's the next one, boss?
Give me a moment.
Well, somebody said, "Where's Frenchie today?" That dude's funny. Frenchie?
Yeah, he's talking about Julian.
Yeah,
but Belgian. Give respect to the man.
Yeah, where's Frenchie today? Yeah.
Get the colonizing country right, all right?
Hey.
Well, they're speaking about the language because he every time Julian comes on and he speaks his French, he brings his cash to the.
Hey, they love it. They love it. They love it. Okay.
That's so terrible. Where's your? And first of all, that first comment after Dorcas was just incredible. We don't need to know that.
Oh yeah, I was like, okay.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I was like, whoa, buddy. I mean, I think you might be on the wrong chat. I don't.
He's trying to spread the word rather than spread.
Well, you did mention that that's your area of focus is working on STIs. So
hey, we'll worry about that later. You shouldn't. Remember, you shouldn't be getting STIs right now. We're in quarantine.
No judgment, no comment.
Hey, some people are finding a way. Life finds a way.
Right? Finding a way. Okay. So wait, was that the last question?
Oh no, we got another. I just had to put it in. So this is from someone from way outside the show, but they wanted me to bring it up on the air. And Luko, I don't know if you know too much about it, but the question is, all right, is there anything that we can do as private citizens to get Congo off of the OFAC list, the Office of Foreign Assets Control sanctions list? Is there anything we can do?
What is that, first of all?
So, goodness, I don't know too much about like how this particular area of foreign policy operates. So I'm going to have to look into that, but I can definitely give you all some follow-up information. So basically there's various like lists that countries get put on when it comes to like trade. And I don't want to speak too in depth of this because I feel like that's where I'm going, or what I think this list is where this is a part of, but I can definitely send you some follow-up information on that.
For sure.
Yeah. Oh, no worries. Do you know what that actually is? What that list is? So
the way it was explained to me, because you can be an individual put on that list, and you can be a country and be put on that list. And at least from what I remember from it, essentially there's certain kinds, like as Luke was saying, certain kinds of trade and stuff that if you're on this list, like us as, coming from an American context, trying to work with somebody who's on that list could get you in trouble. So it almost, it cuts, and Congo's on that list. So it kind of cuts us off to certain trade opportunities. The person who brought up the question to me, he brought it up to me because this person does work in the insurance industry. And they were talking to me about, initially they were looking to try to see like, oh, maybe there was something they were trying to make happen over there. But then in the course of like looking and researching, they're like, oh, what? Congo's on this list. Wow. And it was like, well, damn, if it wasn't there, this person was like, hey, I could make something happen with this. But,
right.
And that's just one thing. I imagine this could probably affect so many industries and cut off a lot of different opportunities.
So if I'm aware, I think the list is more impactful to certain industries versus others being on this list. And I think more so folks that are interested in financial services.
Yeah, that's
part of trade. That's where this list becomes kind of crucial. But we'll do some more research just so that I can make sure that I have like what a potential, if anything, like how private citizens can advocate. It might not even be something that we on our side in the US, typically when you're put on a list like that as a country, there are things that the country has to do and has to fulfill. Sometimes it's within like a time frame. There's different specifications or like qualifications. And when you don't meet those qualifications, then you don't get it. But I also don't know like what the evaluation time period is for this list. So
okay,
we'll do TBD.
Hey, I look forward to that answer. I really, and I'm sure they'll look forward to getting that answer too.
You want to go to the next one? I kind of have a question, but go to the next one, Pat.
For sure. So from from Lil Sis. Oh, I think she's going back to this OFAC list, which from my understanding, it's administered by the Treasury Department, so Feds. Yeah. So I don't know. I imagine with it being under the executive branch, maybe the president and all them have control over that. But yeah, her question seems to relate to that.
We'll get more answers because I knew it had something to do with financial services, but I'm not exactly sure what what Congo has done to be on the list or like what part they violated.
Yeah, I can actually, because I looked into it a little, I can speak to it a little bit. I don't have the full picture, but what I do understand is I believe we got put on the list back in 2006. And I think it was in connection to some of the, atrocities and war crimes type stuff that was going on. So, I mean, pretty much for sure, anyone who's involved in any of that kind of business is on that list for sure. So I know that's a part of it, but I know it's broader than that.
So to answer, it probably has something to do with the minerals and mining, but we'll get more into it, y'all.
Yeah.
All right, absolutely.
Okay. So next one. So can you talk about the crippling of the post office and why that's a problem for everyone?
I mean, you don't like to get mail? But no, I really, outside of your everyday mail, we're right from the election pretty much almost to the day. And in these pandemic streets that we're in, mail-in voting isn't exactly a U.S. strong point, as we've seen in Florida. And the fear right now, right? So we know that the president just brought on a new head of the U.S. Postal Service and basically brought this person in to kind of tear apart and to break down the U.S. Postal Service in advance of the elections, because a lot of folks are going to be, there's an anticipation of a lot of folks will be voting from home or turning in mail-in votes, mail-in ballots. And if your ballot mysteriously happens to disappear or not make it or is delayed, then that's a major issue when it comes to counting the ballots, because we need every single person's ballot in order to make sure, at least for the popular vote, that is accounted for. So not having a well-running postal service will be disastrous, especially in places where voting is already terrible. Florida, Georgia. This could be extremely detrimental to this election season.
Wow, it's funny because I was just thinking about like my own selfishness of like getting packages from Amazon. I wasn't even thinking about it politically. You know what I mean? Like, because what I think here we have to like vote by, is it like mid-October, October 15th or something like that?
October 15th. I would even say I would go one step ahead. We don't know what the postal service is really going to look like. This person just recently been brought in, so we don't know, in the next month or in the next, 6 weeks, like how things are going to be looking with the postal service. And so I've been telling folks, like, if you can even start, you can turn in your ballot by the beginning of October. So then that way, you, at least from your own assurance, can know, like, you put in your ballot in like a month ahead of time. So hopefully there should be no reason why it doesn't make it from your house to where it needs to be delivered in order to be counted as a part of the vote. So if we have a lot of folks that are going to be, turning things in October 15th, we just don't want to overwhelm the postal service. And we want to make sure that if you're not voting in person, if you're voting in by mail, that your ballot does get received and that your ballot gets counted.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And if I could just add one aspect to it, because obviously, Luko, obviously you zeroed in right on the political aspect, which is I hadn't even thought about, but yeah, that's truly important. And obviously this whole thing about certain efforts by certain groups to kind of, cripple the post office over these past couple years. And there's a lot of aspects to it. It's a lot more complicated, but one key aspect of it is that, I know there's an effort to try to essentially have private, delivery services like the FedExes and whatever company, you can think of, but, and really kind of favoring them over the postal service. But the thing to keep in mind is that the postal service actually has to deliver your mail, whereas there are times and instances where, especially in rural areas, where if, the FedEx or the UPS, if they can't get it to you, they hand it off to the post office.
Right.
So they won't even get it to you. The post office takes over. Just think of all the variety of things that, that come in the mail. Now, obviously we get a lot of stuff digitally, but still, you still need to get your mail.
Right.
And mail is actually really important. Most people don't realize, like, opening somebody else's mail is a federal crime. Tampering any mailboxes is a federal crime. You can't just, like, especially if you live in an unincorporated area or if you live in a rural area, you just can't like erect like a mailbox just anywhere. Like there's a whole, mail's really important. Didn't realize this until I also worked in politics in terms of like how important mail, yes, to the address system. But that's to that point. Like you can't just do anything. Like there's a whole process in terms of mail. So yeah, if we're going to the private side, the other thing too, it's like I think the U.S. Postal Service is one of federal employers. And so if that gets away with, then we're also looking at a bunch of jobs will be lost. Yeah. And I really
Black and brown jobs, because there's a big sizable portion that's people of color.
Right. Yes, that as well. Like a lot of folks, and it's one of those jobs where you have folks who will get into the postal service and are like career postal servicemen and women. So they will spend pretty much their whole career being a part of the U.S. Post Office, and will retire and receive their benefits, like rightfully so. The other thing that I was going to say is that a lot of folks don't realize that the U.S. Post Office doesn't receive any like tax funding. All of their funds, how it runs is through the sale of stamps and postage. So that's how it maintains its day-to-day operations. So it's not one of those things where it's like you're spending all this money to keep this vital service intact, especially as we go into this digital space.
For sure.
Let's hit that. Kind of.
Wait, you said you had a question that you wanted to.
I kind of wanted to relate it back to your organization, the Congolese Diaspora Impact Summit. Like, what is there any policies you guys specifically as an organization look at where, hey, Congolese Americans need to worry about, or Congolese people in the diaspora need to worry about?
So for CDIS, the Congolese Diaspora Impact Summit, so we are a non-political organization.
Oh, okay.
So we are not in the space, like our whole kind of purpose was to be able to bring both Congolese folks in America, Congolese folks in Congo, and to have like a platform for folks in North America to congregate and to connect with each other, specifically people that have like an interest in doing work back in Congo in terms of politics, because we recognize that Congo is so big. There are a lot of political views. There are a lot of, I guess, political factions and aspirations. That's just not something that we have decided at this point to engage in. However, because we are in the space of like networking and connecting people together, if we were to see like, oh, these people are interested in doing this, then that's something that we have decided, like we can connect folks to say, oh, we noticed you all are interested in doing this work. You should connect with these people and go about it. So we don't engage, we don't promote, I guess, any like political nor support any specific political party nor
ideologies or anything like that.
Ideology, yes.
I'm with you. Okay.
So everything that I'm saying now is like in my capacity, in my personal capacity. It's just, this is how people should be getting engaged.
No, I'm with it. I just always wondered. Okay. Go ahead, Pat. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And hold on, let me look through, because that may be it in terms of questions from the audience.
Yeah.
I do. Well, this one's kind of a landmine question a little bit, but it's kind of especially for us, it's kind of the elephant in the room. So, and we touched on it all throughout this conversation. So obviously, here, being Congolese, and like a lot of different Congolese diaspora groups throughout the world, we live in a country that has very often, had policies that have hurt our family back home. We've had, especially presidents, put forth policies that have directly caused the deaths of many of our people, killed our leaders, etc. And this question, I'm kind of posing it for that cynical Congolese person.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I'm not going to say on here, but obviously, if we were at the party, everybody talking politics, which politicians' names they would bring up, Bubba. But that skeptical Congolese person, what would you say to them about why they still should care? Why they should still be involved in politics? Why should they give a damn, pretty much?
So just to clarify, are you talking about the skeptical Congolese American person, right? Or just anyone who's identifying as Congolese and why they should be involved in the politics of wherever they're living at the moment?
Yeah, I would say, the second one.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I think just in general, whether you live you're Congolese living in America, or you're living in Belgium, or you're living in China. I don't know, actually, let me not speak on China because I don't know what's happening over there. But or you're living in Kenya, like, your voice matters, especially if you are living somewhere and you are, a law-abiding citizen, you're paying your taxes, you're doing your dues. Like, you have a voice and you should be able to speak on the issues that nation might be engaging in, that is impacting your life and your livelihood there, or impacting the life and the livelihood of your loved ones in Congo. And it's important just in the sense of like, it's dependent upon like your everyday living, right? So if you're not comfortable where you live and if you're dealing with these issues, then how can you effectively and realistically do everything else that you need to do with your life?
Very real.
Well said. You should run for office, Luko.
I'm gonna come for my donations from you if that, if I ever do run for office.
I'll
got my vote.
I'm literally like, you run for office, I'll tell you, I need this, that, this, that. I'm not these people that are like, hey, just go vote. And I'll be like, no, I need stuff done.
Oh, that's fine. As long as you bring, a couple stacks to the conversation. I got you.
Okay.
For sure.
Okay. So we got a question that came in right under the wire real quick.
Oh, that's a good question.
So if you had a short list of 3 important things for people to do in preparation for this election season, what would it be?
So first of all, register to vote if you haven't. And we'll provide those links for you, at least for this venue, so you can know where to register to vote, regardless of where you are in the U.S. or where you're listening to this podcast or viewing this podcast from. So if you're not registered to vote, you can't vote. So you need to register to vote, number one. And then number two, understand the issues that are on the ballot, like what is happening in your community. So the good thing is, like in California, there's a whole guide that you can get for, where you're registered to vote, in terms of, it'll give you all the folks that are running for local office, that are running for if, for example, you have like someone who's running for a House of Representative seats, it'll tell you all the different candidates. It'll tell you like their positions. So you got to do your research. Right. So what I would do when I was in DC and I was a DC registered voter, it usually comes to my, you get that packet, like, I want to say a few months ahead, 6 weeks to a few months ahead. And I would just like read through the packet before I get to the poll station. So I know like, okay, this is the person that I want to vote for, who's going to be taking over, who's running for the school board position. This is the person that I want to vote for, who's running for, I don't know, controller, like whatever position it might be. But know who's running in your area, know what the issues are, so that when you get to when you get to vote, you're not standing there like, because you can't look at anybody else's ballot. You got to be able to just vote on your own. So that's number two. And then number three, though we have a very important election, presidential election, I would say definitely take the time, do your own analysis, make sure that why you're voting for the president is a good reason. I mean, although I feel like everything that has happened is a great reason as to potentially why to vote for somebody else.
It's so funny.
But you are aware of what those issues are and what the next presidential candidate will bring to the table.
Well said. I know from this episode.
I was going to say, just as a bonus point, go out and talk to your community. And I think that politics, even if you disagree with folks and you're not, of the same political party or of the same political ideology, I think that this is also a good time in preparation of the election to make sure that people know where they're getting their news from, and to make sure that they know where they're getting their information from, so that it's not, manufactured information, but that they actually know like what's being said to them. And a lot of our media, there really isn't any objective media, unfortunately, in the US. And so you have to be able to know where that information is coming from, and knowing, what's the tone and what the purpose is behind that particular network and what they're trying to relate to you.
Agreed. When you look at city officials, really do your research, because those are the people who impact you immediately. I cannot stress how important it is to know their stance on issues that you are passionate about. Yeah, especially locally, like I know one thing I want to do in the future is, like, you have to look at, I want to know who the superintendent is. I want to know, what is the school curriculum if you put your kids in like public school? Like, you have the power and you have the right to demand, like, why is this a part of your kid's curriculum and whatnot? You have to be very, very political. I think political awareness, or being like politically engaged, I think we look at it like in the macro, where it's like, oh, let's get to Trump or whatever, right? But literally, it can really be just like, go to your, like you said, local community center, and you find out, like, when's the next health fair? Who's this doctor that's coming here? Who's the dentist that's here? Where can I get a free checkup? Like, or whatnot. Like the city planner. Why are they putting another like Popeyes here? We have enough. Like, where's why are we in a food desert or whatnot? Why, you need to know these stats of why are people dying in your neighborhood, maybe of a certain disease. You know what I mean? Like, people don't know that. Like, in LA County, I don't know in Orange County, but LA County is broken into like service planning areas, like spas or whatever. So if you're in Santa Monica, you'll live 13 years longer than somebody that lives in like South Central. You need to know these things. Like, Santa Monica, there might be one McDonald's in like maybe a 10-mile radius, whereas in like South Central, there might be like, 4 or 5, fast food restaurants. And people need to know that,
No, I agree. I mean, and she makes a great point. Like, you really, I can't stress it enough. And Melissa pointed out as well, like, you definitely need to know what's happening locally. And I tell folks, if you have not, go right now, because of COVID and the pandemic, most city councils are not meeting in person. If they are meeting in person, they kind of have like, they're following their various pandemic procedures, but you can always go to your city council and you can submit questions, you can submit comments, go back. Like, even now, they archive all of their previous conversations. You can see what they're talking about. You can be like, oh, I didn't know that we had a street light on X, Y, and Z corner that just hasn't worked for the last, 10 years. And now they're trying to fix it. Like, those are things that may seem not as important, but when you think about your community, especially if you're someone who's listening right now and you live in a metropolitan city, or if you live in a city that's considered like high traffic, there are a lot of different things that are affecting your health that you may not know it. There are a lot of different things that are impacting, your household, and are impacting your kids if you have them. So it's really important to know what's happening around you locally, in addition to the nation, in addition to, what's happening with your state. But it can be hard. And I empathize with anyone who's like new to this and who's trying to like navigate different things. Look, I have a whole degree. I've worked in the industry, and there's still times where people will be like, oh, that person's not up for re-election. I'm like, oh, you're right. So we don't know, like, you can't know everything, even for the area. I moved from LA County to Orange County. So now I was actually thinking about this today. I was starting to look through like, who's up on the ballot here in Tustin, who's on the ballot here in Orange County, and just thinking about like, the city, and thinking about, all right, who are these folks? Because I'm not familiar with them and their stances, since I knew more so the folks that were representing me in LA and in DC.
Right. Well said. Pat, do you have? Is there any more?
No other questions. One thing I just wanted to add on top of what Luko said, and Melissa, you said it perfectly. Obviously, a month or so ago, we were all incensed. We were all angry about, what happened with George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and it kind of highlighted the fact that, hey, a lot of this stuff that we're mad about, that we're irritated about with the government, a lot of it's not federal, a lot of it is local. So, we talked about, the pothole and the street light, but also your police department, that's local. We talked about the election, but it's different in different states. So like here in California, it's just going to be vote by mail. And he didn't have to register. I got something in the mail the other day that said, okay, you're going to do vote by mail. We just want to confirm this is your address, sign this and send it back to us. Whereas in other states, they're like, nah, you're going to be voting in person. Good luck. Wear a mask. That's local. Now, obviously here, if they tried to pull something like that, like, well, you guys are going to the polls, I imagine the people here would be in uproar about it. But in some of these other places where they're making folks actually go out to the polls, hey, they can get away with that. Maybe the people are disempowered. Maybe they're feeding them some nonsense. But just another incentive of, hey, be involved, know what's going on. So you can be that person in that city council meeting to, say something, to speak the viewpoint that needs to be spoken.
And the final thing that I would just say, you make a great point in terms of, calling out the differences as to like how folks can vote. Here in California, it is going to be vote by mail. Also, if you are someone who's in a position where you are not feeling safe in your household, because we know the pandemic and folks sheltering in place, we do have folks who might be experiencing domestic violence or domestic abuse, or in situations where they're not safe, but they still also want to participate. California, I'm not sure about the other states, has provided an option in a way for folks to be able to register to vote, to vote anonymously. So they have a whole, program that you can sign up for, and they will work with you to make sure that you are able to still vote and to vote in a way that is safe for you and for your household. So another thing, as we are coming out and getting close to this election, you might have folks in your household who are older, who are American citizens, but they don't speak English well. You can translate for your family members. You cannot vote for them. Like, they have to actually select their choices. But another way to be civically engaged and involved is making sure, talk to your community if they have questions. If you're somebody that has a little bit more information, help out the folks in your community who maybe they don't have all the answers, or maybe they need connections to other, services in your city. You can provide translations to folks in your household so that they understand the questions that are being asked on the ballot. You can provide explanations to them. They just have to physically do it themselves. And also volunteer, if you can help take folks to the polls. That's not happening in California, but in other places, if you can safely provide, rides or provide access to folks who do need to get to the polls, that's another way that you can also be civically engaged. So it's a community effort as well. But make sure you register to vote. You cannot vote if you are not registered to vote. And the deadline, it differs according to state by state. But make sure you register to vote. Give yourself enough time so that you can look over the materials and, just get out there and make sure that your voice is known and show up.
For sure.
Absolutely.
For the last part, before we exit out, what I wanted to do was just provide some links and resources to you guys. Obviously, we're providing them. It's not the end all be all. This is a start, but if you want to keep going and doing more research, we encourage you to do so. But want to provide some resources in terms of, in this case, noting about your voting information. So there's a website, vote.org. The link I have there, and we'll provide this in the link. It gives you different voter registration dates for each state. Now, this link is the default. If everything was going good, this is everybody's, deadlines. Now, the second link I'm putting up on the screen is specifically same website, but it's a page where it specifically talks about the different provisions for each state in response to COVID. So obviously, we just talked about, for instance, California, it's going to be vote by mail automatically, so we won't have to go to the polls. But for instance, and I'm kind of looking at the list right now, let me jump to a state where there's a lot of Congolese folks, just as an example. So obviously a place like Texas, right? So according to this site, they're saying early voting for the general election has been extended. So it will begin on October 13th and run through October 30th. And then there's links and everything like that. But so obviously with each state, it's individual, but obviously you don't just have to stick to this website. Also visit your own states or cities election information page, whatever it is. But just as a start to get you guys just on the right path. And yeah, vote. Get out and vote.
Yeah, mother, vote, please.
And vote, and you can still volunteer. I know that it's digital, but vote and volunteer, support your local communities.
All right. So I guess we're coming to an end. Patrick, we don't have any more questions?
Nah, I didn't see nothing else coming. I think we're done.
Luca, I want to thank you so much for being on the podcast and just talking about politics in your great article. Where can people follow you, or if they have any more questions about politics, or even just questions just about policies and stuff like that? Where can people follow you?
Sure. So you can shoot me a message on Twitter at my first name, Lukogho, and then K. So at Lukogho K on Twitter. And yeah, just send me, I would love to hear your feedback. Shoot me a message. You can send me a personal message if you don't want it, all out there. And I will try and respond to, as many folks as possible. And obviously I'm not, by all means, even though I've worked in politics, I am not an expert. I'm not trying to put myself out there, but I will definitely try and help you get your answers to your questions that you have.
Excellent. I want to thank you again. You was a great guest and a lot of informative information. You can follow me, Blake Oziza Wisa, on Instagram. You can just follow us through Bantu Boyz, and then you're able to follow me. Make sure you guys subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. And just be a part of this journey with us. And Patrick, where can people follow you?
Follow me at Congolese.YouTubers or African.YouTubers. Both of those on Instagram. We promote Congolese culture and the diaspora as a whole. And for our brother who couldn't make it today, Chickens.
Yeah, Chickens, yes.
TSHIKENS_Junior. It's a thing. It's his dad's nickname. It's beautiful. But yeah, it's his dad's nickname. For some people that wonder, is he saying chickens? No. It's look. There's a reason.
Yeah. And and you guys on that subscribe on YouTube and Apple Podcasts, please leave a comment or whatever. Tell us what you like or what you don't like. We appreciate every comment, and we'll try to get back to you guys in at least within an hour. So yeah.
Can I mention one more? I forgot one. I don't know how. My bad. And also, you can follow the Congolese Diaspora Impact Summit at Congo. CONGO and then DISUMMIT, Congo Dis Summit. So we will definitely have that as well.
We'll tag when we make the post. We'll tag. Yeah, we'll definitely tag, and we'll put the link in the comment section or in the bio section.
And we're on Twitter as well. Same handle.
Okay, excellent.
And the website's still good?
And the website is still good too. So we'll have all that. Yes.
You got it popping right there.
All right. So yeah, guys, make sure you guys subscribe and keep up to date with everything she's doing, because that summit, you guys are doing great things.
Thank you. We hope to see you we're hoping that COVID will be gone and we can see everyone at the Congolese Diaspora Impact Summit in 2021 in Washington, D.C.
Right. D.C., yes. Oh, thank you. Have been blessed. We appreciate it. So I guess until next time, this podcast will be available on Spotify and iTunes next Monday. But if you guys want to rewatch this or share with your friends, it's on YouTube. So we'll see you guys next time.
Oh, and Facebook too.
Yeah, and on Facebook too. Yes. So we'll see you guys next time. And Luco, thank you again so much.
Thank you all for having me. Y'all have been great.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure. We'll have to do a fun one next time.
Oh yeah, of course.
We'll do some ratchet.
Bye everybody.
Bye.
Bye everyone.